Resource utilization, human resources. Human resources. Work and labor legislation. Labor is an essential and important input in any business. The amount of labor will depend on the farming setup and degree of mechanization on a farm. When evaluating labor requirements, the distribution of labor throughout the year must be taken into account. It may be necessary to evaluate labor requirements of a number of divisions together to calculate needs of a total unit. A possible workforce consists of manual workers, equipment operators, bookkeepers, farm workers, migrant workers, graduates. Aspects to keep in mind when hiring workers. How much labor will I need? What and where are the sources of labor? How does labor law determine my choice? How much will it cost me? Are seasonal workers available? Will I need housing for my workers? Does the company use existing labor in off-seasons? Labor legislation. The following laws apply to farm workers in South Africa. The Basic Conditions of Employment Act 75 of 1997, which prescribes working conditions for farm workers. The Unemployment Insurance Act No. 63 of 2001, which provides security to farm workers for when they become unemployed through dismissal, staff reduction, illness or resignation from their jobs. The Labor Relations Act 66 of 1995, which applies to all workers and employers, and aims to promote economic development, social justice, labor peace and democracy in the workplace. The Labor Rent Act provides security to farm workers living on a farm. The Extension of Security of Tenure Security Act Act 62 of 1997 provides for a legal process whereby a landowner can obtain an eviction order against an employee. When an employee has been unlawfully expelled from the farm, the farmer may be prosecuted in terms of this act. Sectoral Determination Act 13, Farm Workers Sector. Compensation for Occupational Injuries and Diseases Act, Act 130 of 1993. Employment Equity Act, Act 55 of 1998. Occupational Health and Safety Act, Act 85 of 1993. Skills Development Act, Act 97 of 1998. Skills Development Levy Act, 1999. Unemployment Insurance Contributions Act, Act 4 of 2002. Influence of diseases on production and farm management. Acquired Immune Deficiency Syndrome, AIDS, is a condition in which various symptoms and infections, due to damage to the immune system, emerge. These symptoms and infections are caused by the human immunodeficiency virus, HIV. There are currently treatment methods that can delay the effects of AIDS, but no remedy can cure the condition or completely curb the HIV virus. HIV is transmitted through saliva, blood, semen, vaginal fluids, preseminal fluids, and breast milk. This transmission can come in the following forms: anal, vaginal or oral sex, blood transfusion, contaminated injection needles, during pregnancy, childbirth or breastfeeding, or any other exposure to body fluids. The effects that AIDS has on businesses and the economy is very complex. Some businesses are more seriously affected by the epidemic. For example, certain workers such as migrant workers in the agricultural industry could easily be replaced should they die. If these workers are not very important to the business, the sector concerned will not suffer much damage. In other sectors, the story may look very different. Businesses in other sectors can be very seriously affected, even if there is a low incidence of AIDS. If the workers are difficult to replace at death, this can have serious consequences for the business. The financial sector is an example of this, because it requires the special skills of employees. This sector has many highly educated and experienced employees in important positions. Impact of diseases on factors of production. Work. Labor shortages due to illness and death are the most noticeable effect that HIV and AIDS have on the economy. Businesses will experience a large labor shortage as well as the change in the composition of the employees. When there is a major change in the composition of the workforce, it leads to huge expenses related to the training of new workers. In sub-Saharan Africa, there is usually a surplus of unskilled workers and a shortage of skilled workers. Therefore, skilled staff will be more difficult to replace, and thus will cause companies that rely heavily on trained employees to be very susceptible to the impact of the AIDS epidemic. Some key positions can be very difficult to fill with trained staff. Capital. There are two main aspects that a potential investor should keep in mind when investing money, namely, the possible return that the invested capital can yield, and the risk associated with the investment. The higher the mortality rate and the level of emotional turmoil in a community, the greater the risk of the investment. In a sector with rising HIV infection rates, costs will rise and profits will fall. Impact on productivity. Direct influences. Absence due to AIDS leads to a direct decrease in the productivity of a business. People are absent not only because they are sick themselves, but also because someone in the family is sick. Worse, if this person holds a key position in a business, it can have a drastic impact on the productivity of other employees who are indeed at work. Indirect influences. The productivity of a business can also depend on external factors such as infrastructure and electricity, or other businesses' essential services. The impact that HIV has on these factors will indirectly affect the productivity of the business concerned. In some businesses, healthy employees have to work extra hours to make up for their absent colleagues, which causes the business to also have to pay more for these extra hours, but the employees exhaust themselves and will then start working less productively. Workers' ability to focus on their work will also decline when there are problems at home, such as when someone dies from AIDS. Impact on product demand. High HIV prevalence and increased social problems have an impact on demand. Most goods sales depend on certain income groups. When people spend more money on health care and medicines, they have less money left over to buy other products. The result will be that demand for certain products will increase while demand for other products will decrease. Markets that will be most affected are the markets with high income elasticity, which means that the products aimed at high income people will no longer sell as much. Lower income means more people will buy basic necessities, for example staple foods and milk. Markets for medicines and other health care services are likely to benefit from the epidemic. Influence on the community. AIDS also has a huge impact on the community. Due to AIDS, medical expenses will increase more and more in the future. This is because the demand for it will also increase and the sector will most likely not be able to keep up with this trend. People will become increasingly dependent on smaller incomes, as the breadwinners in many households will die. In general, life expectancy in countries with high HIV/AIDS rates has fallen sharply. Impact of health of workforce on production and farm management. To manage a workforce effectively, the employer must care about productivity as well as the employee. There is a direct relationship between the employee's productivity and the farm's profitability. Workers must be cared for, both as individuals and as employees. The good health of farm workers should be seen as an investment in the business. Injuries and illnesses may occur due to unsafe and unhealthy working conditions. The influence of poor health due to illnesses includes the following: absence from work due to illness, time off for disease treatment, low work efficiency due to low energy levels. The healthy workers have to work overtime. Increase in costs and decrease in overall profitability. Reduce risk of losses due to diseases. Workers need to be trained to do diverse jobs to provide labor in crisis situations. Certain farming practices can be outsourced, the mechanization level can be increased. Large farming enterprises should have an HIV/AIDS policy in place with a program that includes the following: treatment and prevention measures that include seasonal workers, care and support programs for affected workers and families, protection of affected or affected employees against stigma and discrimination. Tuberculosis. This disease is known as tuberculosis, often abbreviated as TB. It is also called tuberculosis because it is usually characterized by bodily utterance. TB is caused by the bacterium Mycobacterium tuberculosis, and every year several million people die as a result. It is also one of the biggest causes of death for people who are HIV positive. In addition, TB is a much bigger killer than malaria. 9 million new cases occur each year, and what makes it all the more frightening is that the percentage of tuberculosis infections in South Africa is among the highest in the world. How does TB spread? Where TB is primarily a disease of the respiratory system, it is usually spread by coughing and sneezing. And, it is believed, even by screaming or singing. The tiny bacteria float in the air in the sufferer's ejected moisture droplets, and thus the disease is transmitted. People close to a sufferer can inhale the TB germs, perhaps even germs present in dust after a sufferer has spit on the ground and the saliva has dried out. The biggest danger, however, is sharing a bed or living space with a tuberculosis sufferer. Spread can also be contracted through the digestive tract, in other words by ingesting food or drink contaminated by a sufferer. Causes. Among the main factors contributing to the spread of TB are poor social conditions, overcrowding, large families, poor housing and poverty. Doctors and health professionals who are often exposed to tuberculosis patients are also at greater risk of getting the disease. Actually, however, no one can be sure that he or she will never get TB. People of all ages, nationalities, and socioeconomic groups can become infected in one way or another. Symptoms. If you have tuberculosis, you can feel weak, lose your appetite, lose weight, have a fever or very sweaty at night. These signs can last for several weeks. If you do not receive treatment, they usually get worse. If TB is in your lungs, you can cough a lot of mucus, cough blood or have pain in your chest when you cough. Financial, capital, resources. Capital, definitions, different types of capital. Land, fixed improvements, machinery, equipment, livestock, fertilizer, fuel, etc. are needed in a farm to produce a product. There is therefore a need for capital for investment in these assets in order to convert the capital into products. Capital in farming is therefore not only regarded as money, but also includes the value of all goods that the farmer uses to make the production process easier and more efficient. Capital can be divided into direct productive capital. It is those capital items from which the final income flows, in other words the last link in the capital chain that generates income, such as land, livestock and orchards in production. Non-direct productive capital. It is those capital items that are not directly responsible for the final generation of income, for example fixed improvements, vehicles and tools. Problems with capital as a factor of production. Capital is scarce. Capital is expensive because interest rates for credit are high. It involves a high risk because the financing environment may change. Overcapitalization can occur. Undercapitalization can occur. Adequate collateral/security for the loan may be too little. There are additional expenses for capital redemption and interest. Types of capital. Long-term capital, fixed capital. Long-term capital, longer than 10 years, is capital invested in durable assets and therefore of a long-term nature. This capital cannot be readily traded. Examples are land and fixed improvements, as well as capital invested in vineyards, orchards and plantations. Medium-term capital, movable capital/movable capital. Medium-term capital, between 2 and 5 to 10 years, is used up over a number of production periods and will usually not change shape during the production process. The capital or capital assets cannot be destroyed during one production process, for example tractors, breeding stock, machinery, etc. Short-term capital, working/floating/working capital. Short-term capital, current assets, shorter than 1 year, is normally of a short-term nature and is only involved in the production process during a single year or production season. It is normally used up within the span of 1 year, production season, and includes means of production such as pesticides, feed, fertilizers, seeds, and fuel, as well as capital required for the payment of wages, repairs, contract work, and transport. Sources of financing and the advantages and disadvantages of each. Credit. Credit is when money is borrowed and repaid with interest. 6 sources of credit in agriculture are land bank, commercial banks, cooperatives, Insurance companies. Types of credit. Long-term credit, medium-term credit and short-term credit. Information, collection and use. Gathering information is an important step when you want to diversify. Local cooperative agents, non-profit organizations such as the Department of Agriculture and extension officers at tertiary institutions can all provide essential information on alternative branches/opportunities that can be seized. Collection of information. When starting your own farm or farming business, you need to read a lot about the topic, e.g. on websites and publications. Sometimes you need to attend courses and conferences on how to start and run such a business successfully. In most cases, young people/students are very optimistic about starting their own agricultural business. However, once they start farming, they realize that success depends on hard work. They also realize that there are many practical lessons to be learned in practice. Record keeping is important for any successful farmer. Financial information can be obtained from farm records, for example budgets, cash flow statements and inventories on different types of assets. Markets. Any business is only successful if you can market your product. Marketing your product can involve a lot of steps and a lot of players. It is necessary to identify the items and people needed in your supply chain. Other unique marketing opportunities include focus institutions, industrial plants, exports, special events or attractions in your area. Quiet times in the market can be opportunities for a new business. Also be prepared for competitive wages and benefits of workers. Experience. Experience is not something you can buy. Practical experience in particular is important for a new production business, especially if the business is not related to what you normally do. Necessary knowledge can be gained from people who are already doing what you are considering doing. Volunteering with such a person is a great way to gain experience. Also, start your own business on a small scale until you have mastered the basics. For steps to follow when considering a new business. Gain the knowledge you need to produce and market the product. Produce it for yourself and your family. Produce it for your friends who have tried it, liked it, and asked for it. Do it as a business. Resource utilization, natural resources. Resource utilization, natural resources. Agricultural resources are the land, farm buildings, equipment, labor, and monetary resources that contribute to the production, preparation and marketing of crops, livestock and livestock products in a commercial enterprise. The resources can be divided into three sections, namely natural, human and financial resources. Natural resources. Surface properties are determined by soil, effective depth, texture, permeability, vegetation, botanical composition, plant cover, terrain, slope, topography, climate, rainfall and temperature. Ground, arable land. Land is a scarce resource. Fertile land is scarce in South Africa and there is a great need for land for agriculture, industries, housing, roads, mines, storage dams, etc. Once land has been used for purposes other than agriculture, it is difficult to recover it. Soil production capacity is affected by sensitivity to change or destruction, degradation, climate and location, correct management practices and agricultural capacity of the land. Soil also has economic characteristics such as durability, cannot be easily destroyed and will always have value. Decreasing excess yield. This implies the following. An increase in the amount of fertilizer, capital and/or labor inputs used in the cultivation of a crop usually causes a smaller than proportional increase in the amount of products collected/harvested, marginal yield, unless there is an improvement/change in the nature of inputs, as in precision farming. For example, a farmer who grows crops on his farm uses certain fixed quantities or units of fertilizer input to obtain a higher yield. With each increase in the unit of fertilizer, he gets a higher yield, total yield, but his actual product increase, marginal yield, per unit decreases as the units increase, see figure 1.2. Functions of soil. Soil provides plant nutrients. Under normal conditions, the soil's nutrient status differs depending on the clay content of the soil. The higher the soil's clay content, the more fertile the soil. The function can be affected by fertilization. Soil stores and releases water to plants. The property varies greatly between soils. In clay soils it can be as much as 25 mm of water per 100 mm of soil, and in sandy soils it can be as little as 6 mm per 100 mm of soil. Clay soils' water holding capacity is also much more than in sandy soils where water is more readily available to plants. Soil allows air movement. The ease of air movement depends on the amount and size of soil pores. Clay soils do have more pores than sandy soils, but they are much smaller and thus impedes air movement. Sandy soils do have fewer pores, but they are larger and more helpful in air movement. Soil allows water infiltration. Normally, sandy soils have a higher infiltration rate than clay soils. Soil helps to filter impurities from the water and thus keeps the quality of our air and water high. It is part of a recycling system. Soil helps to control water by retaining moisture and by regulating water flow. It is like a sponge, it absorbs water and releases it back to plants. Soil serves as a medium in which plants grow. The deeper the soil, the better root development. This causes plants to develop better and produce more. Soil is the habitat for many different organisms. Soil plays a role in carbon sequestration. Soil carbon sequestration is the transfer of atmospheric CO2 into the soil by plants. Benefits of ground carbon sequestration are the promotion of food security and the improvement of biodiversity. Soil plays an important role in climate regulation. Soil is heated daily by the sun and heat is trapped in the soil. The heat that is stored in this way keeps the earth warm for a longer time and therefore causes fewer temperature fluctuations to occur. Vegetation. Natural field. Natural field is one of the most important and valuable resources in animal production, as it is the most economical source of animal nutrition, and sometimes the only source of food for ruminants in large parts of South Africa. Pasture ranges from desert and shrubbery to lush grasslands, and is the most important feed source for the national livestock herd, small stock, sheep and goats, and large stock, cattle, as well as for game. Acid felt occurs in areas with high water supply and high carbon assimilation compared to nutrient availability, usually low, and sweet felt in areas with low water supply and lower carbon assimilation compared to nutrient availability, usually high. The distribution of sweet and sour felt is mainly determined by the phosphorus concentration and the amount of available nitrogen in the soil. Mixed field is intermediate between these two types. Planted pastures. Planted pastures can be divided into two groups, namely intensive pasture crops, or cool season grazing crops, and subtropical grazing crops. Both species include annuals and perennial crops. Intensive pasture crops. Intensive grazing crops include the cool season grasses and certain legumes, as many of them are active in the winter and are frost tolerant, and also stays green. See Table 1.2 for examples. The crops must receive additional water through irrigation to be successfully cultivated in areas with low rainfall. If the crops are compared to subtropical crops, they are relatively high in quality, digestibility, and palatability. Probably the most successful examples of legumes are perennial alfalfa, Medicago sativa, annual Medix, M. polymorpha and M. truncatula, and annual clover, Trifolium sp. in the grain production systems of the Western Cape. Commercial grain producers, wheat, barley, oats, plant these species every 2 to 3 years to increase soil nitrogen. Farmers who have dairies, produce fat lambs or round up weaner calves can include moderate species such as oats, long-stem grass, and the like in their feed flow on the farm in order to maintain good animal production. Subtropical pasture crops. Subtropical pasture crops, grasses and legumes, are summer crops that are dormant in winter. In the autumn months, they translocate nutrients to their roots. This allows these crops to emerge in the spring and develop rapidly. Most subtropical grass species planted are native to southern Africa. These types of pastures are established from October to February in the summer rainfall areas of South Africa. Early planting dates are recommended where weed competition is not a factor. This also applies to the lower rainfall areas, less than 500 mm. However, January is usually the most suitable month for settlement. For successful establishment, it is important that the soil profile is soaked and the top few centimeters of soil should be dry with sowing. The grass germinates after the first rain and roots develop in the wet profile. This increases the seedling's chance of survival. These pastures are cultivated under semi-extensive to semi-intensive conditions. A number of subtropical grasses and pasture legumes are available, see Table 1.2, and can be planted in different places with 100 mm to 700 mm rainfall per year. Pasture planting and grazing/veld improvement are done on a large scale in the commercial dairy regions of the country. Grass species such as Kikuyu, Pennisetum clandestinum, blue buffalo grass, Panicum maximum, and smut finger grass, Digitoria erienta, are used, while legumes such as silver leaf, Desmodium spp, are sown in natural pasture to extend their use. Standing hay production in South Africa is important in commercial meat production systems, and a wide variety of commercially available local and imported grasses and legumes are used. Grazing capacity can be increased with the planting of pastures, which leads to more livestock that can be kept on the same size of soil. Grazing capacity and stock load. Grazing capacity is the ability of a specific piece of veld to produce food, i.e. the number of animals that a farmer can keep in a camp or on the farm, without the natural resources, soil, plants, etc., deteriorating. As mentioned, it depends on the field condition. Grazing capacity is expressed in horse/LSU, hectares per large stock unit, or roughly how many hectares are needed to provide 450 kg cattle for a year with food. Meissner et al., 1983, classified all livestock and game as a factor of a large stock unit. For example, one whole sheep ewe, dry, equals 0.15 LSU, while a whole sheep ewe with a lamb is equivalent to 0.20 LSU. For example, a grazing capacity of 30 hectares/LSU means the farmer needs 30 hectares to be able to feed one cattle over a period of a year, or on a farm of 3,000 hectares approximately 100 cattle can be kept. For sheep this means about 4.5 hectares required for one sheep. 7 wool sheep ewes is equivalent to one small frame cow, so the farmer can keep about 700 sheep on his 3,000 hectares farm, or 400 breeding ewes plus the lambs, rams and replacement ewes. Stock loading. It is the number of animals that the farmer keeps on a specific surface of the veld, camp/farm, for a specific period. These are all animals on the farm, big and small, sheep, cattle, goats, donkeys, ostriches, game, etc. Remember that animals reproduce, so all animals, large and small, must be taken into account when determining the multiplication. Grazing capacity and multiplication must be reconciled to ensure the sustainability of a production system. On the farm. Terrain. Terrain includes slope and topography. Slope. Slope determines the tillage ability of the soil and how easily degradation will occur. Thus, soils with the same texture lying on different slopes will differ greatly in terms of water uptake and erosion. The risk of erosion increases as the slope and length of the slope increase. Slope also affects the drainability of the soil. The steeper the slope, the smaller the danger of poor drainage. An increase in gradient makes it difficult to cultivate soil. Steep slopes should be well contoured, divided into terraces, to prevent erosion. Topography. The topography of an area refers to the characteristics of the area, such as the mountains, hills, and contours. These include the altitude above sea level, the slope of the area and the degree of exposure to solar radiation. Climate, influence of light, temperature, rainfall, wind, and humidity on climate. Light. Through the process of photosynthesis, light energy is converted by green plants into chemical energy/carbohydrates, which in turn are utilized by other organisms as food. If all other environmental factors are favorable, the available light energy determines the level of production. In addition to the effect of daylight length, photoperiod, on the total amount of energy, it also affects flower formation and fertility in certain sheep breeds. Because many plants are grown for their fruits and seeds, the length of the photoperiod determines the success of the specific crop in certain areas. Photoperiod also affects the vegetative growth of crops. Temperature. Air and soil temperature determine the biochemical, physiological and physical processes in the plant. Plants can therefore only grow between certain minimum and maximum temperatures, but between the two extremes there is an optimal temperature where it grows best. Rain. The efficiency of rainfall is of utmost importance. It depends on the mode and rate of rainfall, rate of evaporation, seasonal distribution, reliability, in-season rainfall distribution, ground condition, topography. Soil erosion can occur on steep slopes. Soil type. Sandy soil absorbs water quickly, but dries out faster. Clay soil takes a long time to absorb water, but retains moisture for a longer period of time. Shallow soils can absorb less water and waterlogging can be a problem. Deep soils can absorb more water and retain moisture longer. In the summer rainfall regions, rainfall is ineffective due to a high evapotranspiration and unreliability. In the winter rainfall regions, rainfall is more effective due to low evapotranspiration during the growing season. Wind. Wind movement promotes growth as it promotes the supply of carbon dioxide in leaves. However, strong winds are increasing the rate of transpiration and mechanical damage. Plants in strong winds are also smaller, grow abnormally and produce significantly less. Humidity. A decrease in humidity causes an increase in transpiration and evaporation. Land use, planning, utilization and conservation. Land use, planning, utilization and conservation. With effective planning of land use, marginal agricultural land can be withdrawn from loss-making crop cultivation. It can then be utilized more profitably in the farming system, for example, in a system of livestock on planted pasture. At the same time, risks are significantly limited. The planning of land use involves the grouping of land/veld with the same characteristics and use value in units after an intensive soil survey has been done. Veld/pasture for livestock. Natural grazing, veld, forms the basis of animal production in South Africa. Well-managed veld is an excellent and relatively inexpensive source of feed for livestock. At the Mara Research Station, it was found that good veld management can improve animal production by up to 87%, measured in terms of the average daily increase in cattle weight. Veld use for grazing is influenced by the following 4 factors: palatability, topography, vegetation, erosion. Grazing planning and division into camps will help you to maximize the continuous production of high-quality feed. Having feed available in times of slow growth and dormant periods. Supply the nutritional needs of livestock and game. Minimize animal stress. Plan and respond to droughts, floods, fires and other unexpected events. Increase the efficiency of your day-to-day management. Prevent degradation of pasture. Ecological principles of veld management. The rate of veld improvement will largely depend on the nature and intensity of stress factors such as overgrazing, droughts, and the species composition before and after the onset of the stress factor. Benefits of plant succession. The soil develops and improves. The height, quantity, and diversity of vegetation layers increase. Increases plant productivity and develops own microclimate. Protection for the soil and animals increases. Plant diversity increases. The rate of change decreases the more advanced succession is. The relative stability of the plant community increases. The succession status of the veld is mainly determined by specific plant species, indicator plants, that occurs in it. Within each ecological region it is therefore possible to identify plants that are indicators of climax, subclimax, and pioneer status. See Figure 2.3 for examples of indicator plants in the Eastern Karoo. Physiological principles of veld management. The physiological principles of veld management are based on 4 critical growth periods, see Figure 2.4, in the seasonal development of the grass plant, namely initial growth, active growth, storage of reserves, resting stage. When does veld start to grow after the winter/dry season? During autumn, when temperatures drop, plants' growth rate slows down and excess carbohydrates formed in the leaves are transported to the roots and stem bases to be stored for the following spring. The plant uses these reserves at the beginning of spring when the initial growth for the production of the first leaves takes place. As the surface size of the leaves increases, they will increase photosynthetic ability to such an extent that they are able to produce their own carbohydrates to provide energy for growth. The rate of root development also increases as more and more leaves are formed, reaching a stage where the above-ground parts are independent of the stored root reserves. Classification of natural grazing. A suitable classification for natural grazing is mainly based on the physiography of the landscape and rainfall-based. These include the following: palatability, sweet veld, mixed, sour veld, topography, mountains, plateau, higher lying parts, slope, ravines, hills, outcrops, plains, dry plains, ordinary plains, low-lying veld, salt pans, wet valleys, rivers, marshes, streams. Erosion condition: no erosion, moderate erosion, severe erosion. Pasture planning. The principle of pasture planning for veld management is therefore essential to make optimal use of the resource and can be summarized in the following steps. Obtain/draw a soil map of the farm on the basis of data obtained/collected by soil samples and by determining the veld condition. Determine slopes and veld types on the farm and transfer them to the map so that camps are made accordingly. Mapping will show where the fences need to come to separate the different veld types. This makes it possible to make better use of uniform veld. Where the cattle were used to select easier and overutilize the sweet grass, they are now forced to eat the less tasty grasses as well. The utilization of the different veld types at the best growing seasons can therefore be planned. Calculate the area of the veld type unit, determine the veld condition and record it. Group the veld type units according to the approximate veld conditions obtained. Water availability and the installation of water where water is not available in camps is very important. Determine primary camps to be used in the system. Calculate grazing capacity of each camp and determine the number of hectares per large stock unit, LSU, required according to herd size and feed requirement. Allocate primary camps to meet herd needs. Different groups of animals have different needs. So, for example, lactating and growing animals need better veld. Plan your feed flow program to ensure you have enough food for all your animals throughout the year. Pastures, different types. Intensive grazing. Annual pastures, annual ryegrass. Perennial pastures, perennial ryegrass. Subtropical summer grazers. Annual pastures, annual TEF. Perennial pastures, smutsvinger, ulandsgrass. Vegetable crops. Supplementary annual feed crops. Summer and winter. Natural grazers, types. Shrubs, savanna, grassland, semi-desert, karoo. Type of VELD, sweet, sour and mixed veld. Methods for reducing negative impact on the veld. Keep to less livestock as carrying capacity of the environment. Keep portions of natural vegetation where wild plants and animals can still grow next to the cultivated land. Follow a good rotational grazing program/camps. Apply good veld/grazing management practices. Eradicate foreign/invasive plants/weeds/trees. Control over soil erosion. Factors affecting veld management. Carrying capacity will determine the number of animals. The rainfall will determine the period of loading/absence/rest in the camp during the different seasons. Charging intensity will determine the period of keeping. Composition of the herd will determine the number of camps. Supplementation will change the effect on natural grazing. Veld identification types. Veld condition. Choice of veld programs. Camp layout/number of camps. Different types of animals, type of eaters. Capital/economic implications. Climate. What is sweet felt and what is sour felt? These are types of felt and refer to the palatability or sweetness of the felt as it is affected by the temperature and rainfall. Sweet felt is tasty all year round and acid felt is usually unpalatable felt, especially in winter, due to high rainfall in areas where the soil has washed away over many years and the soil has been left with a low pH. This causes the grasses to be low in nutrients. Animals must therefore be provided with licks in the winter. Why is sweet felt sweet? Sweet veld occurs in areas with low rainfall and moderate winters. The soil is fertile due to little leaching, therefore the grass grows in fertile soil and has a high nutritional value. Due to the sweetness of the grass, sweet veld is easily overgrazed. Dry bush veld and the Karoo are examples of sweet veld. Sweet veld. Low-lying frost-free areas. Rainfall varies 250 to 500 mm per year. Most grasses tasty throughout the year. Sensitive to overgrazing. Recover quickly after judicious grazing. How yield? Acid felt. Higher lying parts with lower temperatures. Rainfall 625 mm per year and more. Nutritional value of grasses high in growing season. Sensitive to overgrazing. Recover slowly after drought or overgrazing. What is mixed felt? Mixed felt occurs between sweet felt and sour felt. It is an intermediate form between the two and has properties of both. In mixed felt, sweet veld grasses usually occur in protected areas with fertile soil, for example in the lower lying areas and along rivers. In contrast, acid felt grasses occur in open areas. Mixed felt. Between sweet and sour, mixed. If the properties are the same as sweet felt, it is known as sweet mixed felt. If the properties are the same as acid felt, it is known as acid mixed felt. Overgrazing of sweet grasses can easily happen. Acid grasses can take over due to overgrazing. Why is sweet felt susceptible to overgrazing? In the past, surface water was very scarce in areas with sweet felt, especially during the winter. And consequently there was sparse distribution of pastures. Sweet veld is not adapted for continuous grazing, but rather for short periods of grazing by migrating animals. These areas are also more prone to droughts, for example the Karoo. During droughts, when the veld is already in a state of stress, most damage is caused by overgrazing. Sustained grazing. With this type of grazing, the animals are placed in a camp and left for the full grazing season. The number of animals can vary depending on the carrying capacity and season. Advantages. Less management input. Costs very low, only one camp and water point. Animals are less bothered because they are not moved around. Easier to keep grazing records. Smaller carrying capacity per hoa. Disadvantages. The correct carrying capacity must be determined. Carrying capacity may vary from season to season. Certain parts can be overgrazed and certain grasses can take over. Animals are less handled and seen. Supervision of water supply and licks is neglected. Alternating grazing. With this system, there are mating camps for each group of animals. The animal is moved from one camp to another so that there are no animals on it for a period of time. Advantages. Uniform area can be used to the maximum. Effective utilization of grazing due to different size of camps and variation. Regrowth is faster. During droughts or when grass grows slowly it can be pared. Excess hay can be cut and baled. Animal is often seen and handled. Disadvantages. Costs high due to more wire and water points. Requires better management. More time and labor. Access to vehicles and implements makes it more difficult. Animal is more bothered. Veld management. Veld management can be described as the utilization and conservation of natural veld in such a way that maximum animal production is ensured without adversely affecting the vegetation. Van Rooyen et al. 1995. From an agricultural point of view, the goal of veld management is the continuous production of livestock and/or game products by keeping the veld in a stable and productive state. Van Outzhorn 1992. Factors affecting the veld management program. Carrying capacity. Rainfall. Livestock loading. Livestock composition. Supplementary nutrition. Natural disasters such as fires and hail. Veld type identification. Choice of livestock production system. Number of livestock. Camp layout. Allocation of herds to camps. Economic implications. Properties for classifying natural pastures. Taste/acidity. Topography/plains/mountains. Low veld. Conditions for vegetation compared to the climate. Rehabilitation possibilities. Growth stage. Height of the grasses. Volume of pastures. Digestibility. Nutritional value. Resistance to grazing. Regrowth value. Type of winter and summer plants. Botanical composition. Reasons for the division of grazing areas. To apply crop rotation. To prevent overgrazing. To provide for the rest and restoration of the veld. For good management of the farming system. To provide for the division of the livestock. To reclaim areas exposed to soil erosion. Closure of areas where poisonous plants occur. Excludes high-risk areas/parasites/pests. Group homogeneous veld types. Camps. Making camps. The demarcation of veld types means that veld is utilized more efficiently and better by livestock. And implies that greater profits can be obtained on the same area. In addition, better decisions can be made that facilitate management, and these can be adjusted if necessary. Use can therefore range from good grazing practice for veld in good condition to no grazing of veld in poor condition. Reasons for camps principle. When laying out camps benefits, discuss the benefits of camps. Introduction. Data on soil, as well as climate, temperature, and topography are used to determine what type of crop or animal production policy will develop the soil to its maximum production potential. The suitability of land for agricultural and non-agricultural purposes is determined by land investigations. The boundaries between different soil types are then indicated on a map. Each soil type is then very clearly defined. Advantages of camps in livestock production. Veld types with the same potential and palatability for grazing are fenced off together. Alternating grazing and/or pressure grazing is possible and regular rest periods may be allowed. Different groups of animals can be kept on one farm. Different grazing habits of different types of animals differ and can be accommodated. Animals are kept safe. Certain parts, such as waterways and parts that are prone to erosion, can be fenced off separately. Loading and animal ratio can be controlled according to the ability of the veld. If campfires are part of management, they can be more easily controlled. Benefits of camps in crop production. Dividing a farm into crop production units gives the farmer the opportunity to apply crop rotation system or program. If the different camps, production units, have been fenced off, livestock production can also be part of the crop rotation system. Different camps give rise to different crops as part of a crop rotation system. This will have a positive effect on the financial viability of a crop production business. Edible material left after grazing. Root reaction. Grazing period. Short, long, continuous. Because farmers' management skills differ, grazing standards were established according to each region for the different types of veld in South Africa. If veld utilization takes place that is outside or higher than the laid-down grazing norms, great damage can be done to the veld's vigor and composition. Principle when setting up camps. Dividing a farm into camps for livestock farming is very important because it will ensure that the natural pastures will be utilized optimally. The natural veld is divided into camps so that each veld type is treated according to requirements and utilized according to potential. The following principles must be followed. Veld types with the same potential and palatability for grazing are camped together. Small parts with less tasty veld can be camped together with larger parts with more tasty veld. Certain parts such as watercourses and parts that are prone to erosion can be fenced off. Separately, the number of camps allocated to a group of animals includes the following. Livestock loading. Animal relationship. Alternating grazing. Regular rest. Veld fire. Advantages. Discuss the benefits of camps. Veld types together. Small parts with less palatable veld can be camped together with larger parts of more palatable veld. Alternating grazing is possible. Different groups of animals on one farm. Different types of animals, grazing habits differ. Pressure grazing can be applied. Animal safety. Certain parts such as watercourses and parts that are prone to erosion can be fenced off. Separately, the arable land is consequently divided into more or less homogeneous units with respect to the following. Suitability for a certain crop. The degree of soil preparation required. Drainage requirements. Irrigation. Fertilizer needs. Plowability of the soil. Land use, planning, utilization and conservation. Pollution. Pollution, degradation and conservation of land. Agriculture, more than most other industries, is dependent on the Earth's natural resources. Every action therefore has the potential for pollution. Knowledge of possible sources of pollution can help prevent agricultural pollution. Land use can lead to degradation and runoff. Water runoff must therefore be planned so that it takes place in a controlled and safe manner. Where possible, natural water drains should be used to divert runoff. Farming activities must/may not interfere with these natural waterways. It is therefore important that the inclusion of contours for the diversion of water to natural waterways is carefully planned. Pollution. Pollution simply means the pollution or contamination of the earth, our planet's air, its soil, its waters, and even the waters below the earth, spring or well water. Put another way, pollution is the detrimental effect that certain substances have on the natural environment. Such substances, which are dumped or spread in large concentrations in certain places, can be things that do not occur naturally, such as industrial and radioactive waste products and insecticides. Sources of pollution in the agricultural sector include the following. The shipping of seeds, food products and machinery. Abuse of chemical pesticides, herbicides, fertilizer, and of excess irrigation water. Food processing plants, fish production, soil erosion. When soil erodes, it flows into lakes, streams and dams. This causes a build-up of sediment and pollution. Several factors influence the rate of erosion. Increased rainfall and increased intensity of rainfall in an area. The soil texture, silt erodes the easiest while sand erodes the most difficult. Livestock production. Methane gas, ammonia and bad smells are common where livestock manure is present. The gases are a natural source of air pollution. Anaerobic, oxygen-free conditions often cause the odors and gases to form and lead to a decrease in air quality. Soil contamination occurs when substances in the manure mix with the soil. Depending on the level of substances, soil may become less fertile, or at worst infertile. Heavy metals, zinc and copper, in the manure contaminate soil. Excessive levels of nitrogen, phosphorus and potassium also contribute to soil pollution. Pollution of surface and soil water occurs when substances in the manure dissolve in water. Harmful bacteria such as fecal E. coli bacteria can be transmitted in the water. Nitrates in stored manure can leach through the soil and make the water supply dangerous for young children. Fertilizers and pesticides. Excessive fertilization is expensive as well as harmful. The drift of pesticide mist or droplets causes pollution. Crops, surface water and soil water that are not targeted are potentially at risk if drift occurs. Several factors influence the drift of pesticides. Larger droplet size reduces the risk of drift. Lower pressure settings help reduce drift. Wind speed and wind direction are important factors in drift. Temperature and humidity affect drift. Adherence to label instructions reduces the risk of pesticide contamination. Careful management of irrigation systems can reduce pesticide pollution. Producers must use enough moisture to promote plant growth and absorption of pesticides. Too much water can cause pesticides to wash under the plant root zone and into the soil water. Prevention of pollution. Obtain information from chemical suppliers and use only those that are relatively safe and biodegradable. Follow all prescribed safety precautions, recommended methods, and dosages for administration, as prescribed on the label instructions, and do not use homemade brews. Train farm workers to use chemicals safely and appropriately. It is also mandatory under labor law. Store all toxic chemicals safely and behind lock and key, and check supplies to make sure the chemicals are not stolen or misused. It is also mandatory under health and safety legislation. Dispose of unused or unnecessary chemicals in the manner prescribed for hazardous substances, i.e., store them behind lock and key until they can be disposed of at a landfill that has a legal permit for the dumping of hazardous substances. Investigate alternative methods of pest control, for example by control by natural insectivores or the use of natural hormones to disrupt the pest breeding process. If poisons need to be used to control problems, consult nature conservation officers or other experts on the best methods and materials to use so that no target species are hit. Soil degradation. Soil loss/degradation is a global problem and is caused by soil damage due to overexploitation due to poor farming techniques, overgrazing/deforestation, climate change, population growth and urban expansion, pollution and waste disposal. Consequences of soil degradation are loss of numerous soil nutrients, infertility leading to bald spots and no vegetation, ecosystem losses, water scarcity, rapid climate change, poverty and migration. Maintaining soil potential is very important and is influenced by several factors. Soil is sensitive to chemical factors, salinity, pollution, acidification, nutrient imbalances, etc. Physical factors, wind/water erosion, compaction. Biological factors, natural waste, biodiversity losses, loss of carbon, etc. Degradation and the ability of soil to recover after deterioration are important qualities of soil. Thus, for example, it can be said that a piece of land has the quality that it is fertile or insensitive to wind erosion. Field day degradation as a contributing factor to soil degradation can be divided into 5 categories. The loss of coverage, change in species composition, forest encroachment, invasion of alien plants, deforestation. The loss of coverage has further consequences. Without plants to retain water and help the water cycle, an area can become a desert. Without moisture and plants, the soil can be blown away or washed away. When soil remains unprotected, it can be exposed to erosion. Land conservation. Land is a resource that must be preserved. Soil conservation is a way to maintain soil fertility by protecting the soil from erosion and loss of nutrients, as well as from pollution and degradation. As the organic matter in soil increases, soil erosion decreases. Better soil cover with crop residues reduces soil erosion. As the length and degree of slope increase, the velocity of water will increase, causing accelerated erosion. Management practices such as incorrect cultivation practices affect soil erosion. Cultivation systems should include legumes and cover crops because they hold soil better in place. Tillage should be kept to a minimum so that crop residues can protect the soil and retain moisture. Manure and waste products from intensive farming systems must be stored properly to protect soil and water quality. Alternative methods of pest control must be implemented. Integrated pest management involves the use of pest management practices with a view to reducing chemical pollution. Parts of a piece of land should be sprayed selectively where problems exist rather than spraying the entire area. This will reduce the potential for pollution. Methods for restoration of soils. Planting of vegetation. Correct bearing capacity of field. Ground cover. Add agricultural lime/gypsum to acid soils. Drainage of brackish soils. Ground contours. Minimum operation/no operation. Addition of organic matter. Contours. Definition of topography. These include the height above sea level, the slope of the area and the degree of exposure to solar radiation. The topography of an area refers to the area, characteristics of an area, such as mountain. Leeward contours of a farm. If there are differences in contours on a farm, it will require contour farming. Contour farming is the practice where the direction of runoff is changed from directly hill down around the slope of the hill on contour. The degree of contouring is determined by the topography of the farm. Criteria for making contours. Contour lines are lines that run transversely over a hill slope in such a way that the lines remain at the same height and therefore do not go uphill or downhill. The correct establishment of contour lines is very important. If contour lines are incorrectly confirmed, they can increase the risk of erosion. It is therefore very important that farmers understand the concept of contour lines and are helped to establish them correctly. Contour lines are established so that the vertical distance between the lines does not vary. The horizontal distance between two contour lines will vary as the slope of the slope varies. Lands with a wavy topography should be plowed across the slope and planted as close as possible to a 90 degrees angle to the general fall of the soil. As contour lines pass through a hilly topography, they will be closer to each other on the steeper part of the slope and further away from each other on the less steep part of the slope. Reasons to make contours. The reason for contour planing is to combat surface erosion. Reducing erosion will limit soil drainage and will encourage water infiltration. Contour cultivation is applied to soil with a slope where annual crops such as winter cereals or summer crops are grown. Orchards and vineyards are also planted on the contour. Contour farming is determined by potential erosion criteria is determined by the topography of the region, farm. In general, it can be said that contour planing, which follows transverse slope planing, is more effective on slopes between 2 to 100%. Contour farming practices reduce water runoff and soil erosion. Contour and transverse slope farming should be combined with other conservation practices to achieve the purpose of conservation farming. The closer the driving gradient is to the true contour, the greater the erosion control. Reef height is determined by the plowing, soil cultivators, and planting equipment. Contour methods. Minimum row gradient. The crop furrows should have a sufficient driving gradient to ensure that runoff water does not accumulate and damage crops. Row drainage of not less than 0.2% is required for soils with a low water infiltration rate, clay soil. The same is true for crops that are sensitive to short-term water dam conditions, waterlogging conditions. Maximum row gradient. The row gradient should coincide with the contour as closely as possible. This will help reduce erosion hazard. The maximum driving gradient should not be greater than 1/2 of the uphill slope percentage or 2%, whichever is less. Stable outlets. Surface flow from contoured lands should yield to stable outlets. For example, where grass-covered waterways serve as land boundaries or underground outlets. Grass-planted waterways and other appropriate practices can be applied in such a way that they protect areas of, potentially, concentrated water flow erosion. To increase the efficiency of contour farming by controlling water flow, cover crops can be planted. These can be permanent coverings such as intercrop cultivation in transverse rows or on transverse walls over the grand slope. Additionally, mulching can be applied. Benefits. Contours. Contour farming practices reduce runoff and soil erosion. Contour farming is more efficient on slopes of between 2 and 10%. Contour and transverse slope farming should be combined with other conservation practices in order to achieve the purpose of conservation farming. The closer the driving gradient is to the true contour, the greater the erosion control. Reef height is determined by plowing, tillage and planting equipment. The higher the reefs, the less overland water flow will be reduced. Reduce nutrient losses. On slopes longer than 120 meters, the volume and power of overland water flow is too large for the capacity of contour reefs to control the water flow. Plant residues as cover, as with mulch, will reduce overland flow. The cover, plant remains, will extend the slope length at which contour farming can be practiced. Contour farming combined with mulching will reduce the leaching of plant nutrients, as can be seen with mulching. The leaching will plan. Disadvantages of contour farming. Contour farming is an expensive method of crop production. Not only must the contour walls be erected as initial capital, but the walls must also be maintained. Overland movement by heavy implements and equipment is limited to the contour strips, e.g. crop threshing machine. The implements must operate within the contour strips. Farm planning, land. Arable land. The influence on soil through human interaction. Over the years, farmers have increasingly used chemicals to control pests. Intensive livestock farming has similar consequences in cases where farmers release large amounts of sludge into drainage channels of water, from where it ends up in our soils, from feedlots and milking parlors. Fertilizers can improve soil fertility, but soil must be well managed in the first place. This prevents the organic matter in the soil from shrinking, and the soil structure from being destroyed. Arable land is lost due to the intrusion of urban and industrial development. The natural process of soil erosion has accelerated due to human activities and modern farming methods. Soils degraded due to over-irrigation. Eventually the land becomes unusable for agriculture and lies unusable. Developing countries are under great pressure due to the rapid population growth. When marginal land is cleared for cultivation, it often leads to the total collapse of production and livelihoods on farms. Forests and trees, from harvested plantations, are destroyed. The consequence of this is that biodiversity is lost. Wetlands are often drained to make land available for housing and other developments. The production possibilities and influence on soil. Land must be used in such a way that it produces over the long term at the highest possible profit. However, production must be sustained and not decrease over time, rather, the soil needs to be rebuilt and improved over time. Soil potential is only a meaningful term if it is in relation to a specific crop. For example, a soil type that is not suitable for the production of dryland maize may be ideal for grazing. An important aspect of soil surveys is the evaluation of soil suitability for use. The optimal utilization of land usually takes place according to steps that are relatively standard. Namely data collection that includes classification, determination of soil behavior and the evaluation for suitability. To get from the data that describes the soil to prescriptions about its use, a few steps are followed that yield a certain product each time. The collection of basic data. Soil data collection must be orderly and systematic in order to be meaningful and useful. The data are collected by describing, analyzing, and measuring the soil. The process can be summarized as follows. Point descriptions. Point data is ideal for collecting soil information and is usually done in a soil pit, profile hole. The soil pit is typically 152 to 203 cm deep and about 150 to 200 cm wide. However, using a soil drill is easier and not as demanding as the above, and more points can be examined faster and easier. Point data can also be described at a road excavation, auger hole, erosion wall, or at any place where a soil profile has been exposed. An important piece of information for point data is the location coordinates. Point data can be broken down into three categories. Physical properties are described on the site and refer to the soil condition at a given time and place. It refers to texture, depth of horizons, structure, color, tech and plasticity, hardness, rock fragments, depth of root limiting layers. Chemical properties are mainly determined by laboratory analysis and include the following: pH and measured particle size and mineralogy. Calcium carbonate percentage and effervescence can be determined in the field. Complex analysis of electrical conductivity, EC, and sodium absorption ratio. Gypsum content. Characteristics of the landscape and climatic conditions are described on the site and include slope, Landform. Erosion. Flood potential. Height above sea level. Rainfall. Temperature and soil temperature. Spatial data. Spatial data is, as the name implies, data made available to the user by satellite images, digital aerial photographs and digital terrain data. Examples of today's use of spatial data include Google Maps and Google Earth. There are several others. Card unit data. A map unit is a description of each demarcation made on a soil map. It describes where the unit is located on the landscape, the composition of the soil in the map unit, the characteristics of each type of soil present, other information, such as ecological aspects and land uses. Map unit data is collected by means of mapping, observations and field notes, i.e. with point descriptions. Soil data, collection, interpretation and application. Soil data is collected by describing, analyzing and measuring the soil. A description of soil profile and the environment, as it appears in the report, is data in scientific format. Soil data describes the nature of the soil by referring to the properties such as color, texture, structure, depth, pH and temperature. This includes quantitative chemical and physical, but also morphological and classified data, soil form, and/or soil family data of the soil. Furthermore, aspects of the environment, such as slope, geological surface deposition or underlying rocks. All this data is collected through soil surveys. Soil maps. Soil maps should contain the soil images and enough back-soil information so that the user of the maps can quickly locate the area. The information is essential because it gives an indication of the soil potential and may include quantitative characteristics such as chemical properties, e.g. mineral composition and fertility, physical properties, texture, structure, color and depth, morphological properties, classified data, soil form and/or soil family data of the soil. This includes aspects of the environment, such as slope, geological surface deposition or underlying rocks. All this data is collected through soil surveys. Collection of regional data through surveys and mapping. Initially, aerial photographs of the region are taken and studied. It gives a preliminary indication of layout, topography, drainage patterns and possible soil differences. After that, the area is visited and various details regarding arable lands, borders, wire fences, roads, buildings, etc. are visited. Then indicated on the aerial photo maps. Preliminary sketches of the lands and field types within a region are now being done. The farm or area must be divided into homogeneous land and/or felt types. Use of land data. To determine the fertility of soil. Compile soil classification system. Determine the morphological properties of soil. To use land according to potential. The chemical analysis of soil. The phosphate, potassium, magnesium and calcium levels are determined. pH is determined. The amount of magnesium sulfate and gypsum, calcium sulfate, required for the crop. The plant nutrient section indicates the amount of fertilizer to be used. Soil properties. The soil data collected describes the nature of the soil by referring to the soil properties that follow. Soil color. Soil color gives an indication of, for example, the drainage capacity, type of minerals and amount of organic matter in the soil. Red, good drainage. Yellow, less dry than red soil. Gray, waterlogged soil. Black, high humus content. Brown, usually the topsoil organic matter present. Stains in the subsoil, fluctuating water table. Soil texture. This is the ratio of sand, sludge and clay particles and varies from sandy soils with a fast infiltration rate but poor water holding capacity. Clay soils with a slow infiltration rate but good water holding capacity. Clay soils are more fertile than sandy soils because plant nutrients are preserved. Farmers often talk about light soil and heavy soil. A coarse textured soil is light because it is easy to cultivate, while a fine-textured soil is heavy because it is more difficult to cultivate. Soil texture is permanent and cannot be changed. Soil texture can be determined either mechanically or in the field. The ratio of the different soil particles in soil gives rise to the different texture classes, see table below. And figure 2.14. Classes of soil texture. Soil structure. Soil structure is the grouping of soil particles into groups. These groupings become aggregates or called beds, and often form characteristic shape types within certain soil horizons. For example, grain particles are characteristic of the surface horizon. Structure indicates the natural cohesion of soil particles when the formation of larger parts takes place. Structureless soil is loose and sandy. Such land is usually high-potential agricultural land. Structured soil, blocks or prisms, has a high clay content and has a low to marginal agricultural potential. Soil structure and description. Effects of soil structure on water infiltration. Soil depth. Soil depth gives an indication of the volume of soil that the plant can use and which is conducive to moisture retention. Effective soil depth is the depth where sufficient moisture, nutrients, and air occur. It can be reduced by rocky layers, high clay content, waterlogged layers, limestone layers, and acidic subsoil and compacted layers. Different crops have different requirements in terms of effective soil depth. Soil acidity or pH. The pH of soil is an indication of its acidity or alkalinity. Acidic soils have a pH of less than 7. Most plants grow optimally at a pH, water, of 5.5 to 7.0 and a pH, KCl, of 4.5 to 6.0. Where soil acidity requirements of the crops are not known, the target should be a pH, KCl, of 4.7 to 5.0. If the soil's pH is unfavorable, the available plant nutrients are limited, leading to yield loss. To change the pH of soil, the following can be done. Apply agricultural lime, calcium carbonate, to increase the pH. If soil has a magnesium deficiency, apply dolomitic lime. Apply gypsum, calcium sulfate, to lower the pH. Soil temperature. Temperature is a measure of the intensity of heat. Plants grow in a fairly narrow temperature range. 15.6 degrees Celsius to 37.8 degrees Celsius. Temperature has a direct effect on photosynthesis, breathing, perspiration, loss of water, uptake of water and nutrients. The rate of these processes increases with an increase in temperature. Temperature also affects soil organisms. Nitrifying bacteria are inhibited by low temperatures. The pH can also drop in summer due to the activities of microorganisms. Soil temperature also affects water and nutrient uptake. Soil water. The availability of soil water is determined by a variety of soil properties such as texture, organic matter in the soil, etc. Soil qualities. Soil qualities are derived from the soil data and information. It is used here as a synonym for attributes and derivatives. Soil qualities refer to the inherent behavior of the soil. It is determined solely by the soil and environment and is not dependent on the use of the soil. Land. Quality information is essential for determining soil suitability. Examples of soil qualities are soil fertility, infiltration rate, water holding capacity, saturated hydraulic conductivity, internal drainage class, physical activity, etc. Soil quality therefore derived from the interpretation of the collected soil data, soil properties. Various characteristics of the soil and the environment affect soil qualities. When interpreting data, as many as possible of the soil properties that play a role must be considered. For example, saturated hydraulic conductivity, water movement in soil, will be affected by texture, structure, gross density, organic material content, silicate clay mineralogy of the soil, A particular soil property can therefore affect more than one soil quality. The soil properties that affect the suitability of soil for most uses are the minimum data collected during soil surveys. This is why texture is such an important property of soil. It affects most common land qualities that affect general land use. The soil and environment are described as far as possible in order to draw the conclusions to quantify. However, certain soil qualities can only be derived qualitatively, while others, such as water holding capacity, can be calculated. Meaningful evaluation of soil also depends on correct interpretation of soil qualities. Soil suitability. To determine the suitability of land for use, the land is evaluated by measuring its qualities against the requirements it must meet for the specific use, matching. The suitability only applies to the specific use. For example, the saturated hydraulic conductivity of a piece of land must be high to make it suitable for irrigation. Other uses have different requirements. Lack of information will therefore cause the evaluation and classification of a piece of land to be incomplete. If the information is deficient, the classification and evaluation will show the same deficiencies. In the table above, an Avalon soil type for irrigation suitability is evaluated. The basic requirements for irrigation are adequate infiltration, internal drainage, water holding capacity, external drainage ring. Example of soil description and sustainability determination/application. The following principles should be kept in mind when interpreting and evaluating soils. The properties and qualities of soil are transferable from one use to another, but suitability is not transferable and only applies to a particular use. Good agricultural land is not necessarily good for engineering purposes, and land suitable for one crop may be unsuitable for another. Soil properties must be interpreted and evaluated as a combination. The physical activity of soil, for example, is determined not only by the clay content, but also by the clay mineralogy. The thickness of the layer is also important in this case. Shallow soils that are physically very active carry less risk of cracking structures than deeper soils. The availability of technology affects the suitability of soil because it can enable the user to manipulate conditions. Sandy soil, which compacts easily, for example, has a higher potential for cash crop production if ripping technology is available. The suitability of soil is subject to extreme factors that play a role, for example climate. Climate is especially important for evaluating the suitability of soil for crop production. The suitability of soil for a certain use is determined not only by its potential and limitations, but also by its susceptibility to deterioration under certain conditions. Thus, the deep clavely soils of the Western Free State have a certain potential for the cultivation of maize, but it is vulnerable to degradation by wind erosion during maize cultivation. Other aspects, such as distance from the market, affect not only the suitability of land but also its value. The information collected during a land survey and the classes within which the lands are grouped are rendered in the form of a map of an area. Additional information is also obtained from aerial photographs and GPS readings, for example, slope, boundaries between soil types, types of vegetation, degree of erosion. Using the maps, arable land is divided into homogeneous units with regard to machinability, drainage requirements, irrigation, preparation, suitability for crops, fertilization requirements, etc. Note, it is extremely important that crops are adapted to the soil type. Using land for the wrong purpose can cause irreparable deterioration. Alternative branches and utilities, agritourism and niche markets. What is agritourism? Urbanites were trapped in the city rush and generations of them began visiting commercialized tourism destinations. Traditional destinations and routes to sunny beaches and national parks are still popular, but the trend these days is rather cheaper, adventurous and non-commercialized alternatives. From this, agritourism originated. Agritourism is a very limited concept that refers to the different forms of tourism that relate to agricultural activities and/or buildings with an agricultural function. This particular form of tourism is therefore managed by farmers, usually as a second activity, with agriculture as the main Occupation and source of income. A distinction is often made between agritourism and the term farm tourism, farm accommodation, which is used simply to refer to the use of former farmhouses as tourist accommodation. It is about the optimal and wise use of scarce natural resources, and producers are increasingly realizing that this way of adding value can hedge them against changing climate patterns, stiff competition and the value of the rand, says Mr. Rion Nawes, Manager, Agricultural Statistics at the Western Cape Department of Agriculture. The agricultural sector is a resource waiting to be exploited to the maximum tourism product. Excellent opportunities exist on farms to maximize the development of the tourism industry within the agricultural sector. However, it is important to offer unique activities. The dynamic environment in which agriculture operates today necessitates farmers worldwide to find ways to add value to their farming industries. Staying profitable in the modern, global agricultural economy is a major challenge for the survival of most farms. South African farmers must also look at other alternatives to survive, of which agritourism is one. Definition and description of a tourist. A tourist is a person who travels away from home for whatever reason, for vacation or any other reason. A tourist has several characteristics, such as: a tourist travels away from home to a destination that may be on its own, or it can be done as a group of people. A tourist tries to experience things he/she cannot experience at home. A tourist spends money in the place he/she visits and thus contributes to the local economy. Tourism is the largest earner of foreign exchange and also the largest generator of income and job creation worldwide. Tourists can be divided into two types. Domestic tourists, citizens who travel around in their own country, are taking shorter holidays closer to their homes on a regular basis. Foreign tourists often want to get to know South Africans' culture and way of life, especially in rural areas, firsthand. Types of tourism that could potentially create a market for the farm. Rural tourism is a concept that covers tourism activities designed and managed by local people, and is based on the strengths of the natural and human environment. Ecotourism is about traveling to a natural area to understand the environment and history there, while creating economic opportunities that make the conservation of natural resources financially beneficial to local citizens. It further leads to types of tourists entering agritourism, each with its own end goal, namely education tourists, people visiting places for research. Adventure tourists, people who want to do exciting things while on vacation. Cultural tourists, people who travel to attend cultural events. Product route tourists, tourists who follow routes to see how agricultural products are produced/processed. How do I start? Because a variety of resources are available on farms that are not economically suitable for traditional farming practices, such as mountains and arable land, it offers farmers the opportunity to utilize those resources in a way that adds value to their farming. Farmers can market attractions and experiences that their farms offer to tourists in a unique, original way. Start with what's on your site. Make a survey of the potential attractions that visitors will have going on, which may include physical resources, accommodation, swimming pool, remember the safety issues. Natural resources, maybe nice swimming pools or interesting hiking spots, fishing opportunities. Game. Climate, your unique selling point may be the possibility of snow in winter. Owner/manager/staff strengths, use the knowledge you have. Activities, consider how you can give your guests a taste of farm life. Make them part of harvest time or let them pick their own fruit, for example. Various activities on farms that are part of agritourism. Farm accommodation. The sale of farm products from the pantry. Harvesting of products by visitors, for example on strawberry farms. The feeding of farm animals. Visits to product routes, for example wine cellar visits and wine tasting events. Visits to guest farms, for example ostrich farms near Oudtshoorn. Visits to game farms. Erection of a road stable. Four-wheel drive vehicles and lanes. Hiking, mountaineering, fishing, equestrian and so on. Caravan parks. What drives the demand for agritourism? A few phenomena stand out. People who can spend money these days spend more on leisure, adventure and experiences. There is a tendency for urbanites to move to the countryside for vacations in search of space and a uncomplicated lifestyle. Many people have a nostalgia for the countryside and want to expose their children to it. Looking at what drives supply, it seems that farmers want to increase their incomes, reduce risks through diversification and make optimal use of their resources. The global economy is forcing the farmer to supplement his income, and many see this in agritourism. The purpose of agritourism is the following: to increase revenue, job creation. Women mostly handle the agritourism industry on a farm. This is also the case in Britain, America, Germany, Italy, and other European countries. In virtually all cases, extra work is created through tourism activities on the farm, and more than 80% are jobs for women. An important aspect is the contribution of agritourism to the macroeconomic objectives of the government, especially in the rural areas. These are aspects such as housing, training, empowerment, economic growth. A contribution to socio-economic development is training provided to employees. Training is an important form of empowerment and provides more job security for trained employees. Establishment of extra structures is a direct investment in the tourism industry and the farm, but also in the local economy, because materials, goods, and labor are bought locally, which stimulates the local economy of a town and district. Conservation of resources. In order to be successful and sustainable, farmers need to conserve their resources to increase attractiveness. In order to establish agritourism as an industry, the following important aspects must be considered. It must be determined whether it is a business or hobby, because management inputs are then divided between the farming and the tourism industry. Agritourism is not an instant recipe for prosperity, and if someone does not farm successfully, agritourism is not a guarantee of success. People have certain expectations, and so it is important to understand aspects such as customer service and satisfaction. A farmer must be available 24 hours a day. Marketing and supply of the product is mostly direct. The farmer markets himself and there is no middleman as a buffer. Agritourism is mostly not a destination. This means that people do not necessarily drive to your farm for a week's holiday, such as, for example, sea or game park. Thus, marketing must be part of a regional or district initiative. Tourism providers must market a package together by having a system of referral where one provider refers the tourist to another, in order to keep the tourist in an area longer. The experience is marketed, not the destination. Agritourism providers also have a need for marketing expertise. How to be service-oriented. Knowledge of entrepreneurship and business development. Compiling feasibility studies and business plans. Financial management and planning. Expertise on cash flow planning and budget control. Communication skills. Marketing plan for agritourism. A marketing plan is a requirement. This is the farmer's roadmap to successful agritourism. It can be fatal for individual agritourism businesses to assume that where the rural environment is the main attraction, no marketing on their part is required. Agritourism in the garden route is mainly marketed individually. However, it has been proven in South Africa that partnerships and group marketing are beneficial strategies. An example is the wine routes in the Western Cape. The farmer must identify his particular market. He should not try to get the whole population as his target market. He needs to focus on that part of the population that is interested in what is going on his farm. For example, he can concentrate on offering programs for children and school groups, provided he meets certain requirements, such as that his farm is not too far from the town or city. Such groups cannot travel for hours to get to a farm. He must compile a package that makes his farm special and distinguishes it from other farms or destinations in the area. Children, or any tourist, want a special experience and they want to be entertained. Demonstrations, tractor rides, horseback rides, or anything that will captivate children or visitors can be offered. Offers interesting goods for sale. When it comes to access or accommodation tariffs, the farmer must consider his target markets. Try to offer as large a variety as possible at lower prices. Use an advertising medium that will reach the target market. Good experiences are retold, which is why it is important for people to leave satisfied after a farm visit. Insurance implications for agritourism. Because visitors are allowed on the farm, it is important that insurance against injuries that can be sustained by tourists is taken out. Property insurance is also important because it will enable the farmer to repair property damaged by tourists. Advantages and disadvantages of agritourism. Advantages. Entrepreneurship in sometimes remote areas is stimulated and jobs are often created for the farm and the wider community. Agritourism also serves as an antidote to the emptiness of the countryside. Positive farm visits improve the perception that the consumer has of agriculture. For many city children, it is a revelation to see how a cow is milked, how cattle look up close, how they are planted and plowed, and what is going on a farm. There are attractive cash flow benefits for the farmer. It offers further diversification in the farm itself, but also circulates and can eventually provide stability to an entire rural environment. It has a lot of educational value. It provides training opportunities for staff, such as country guides, chefs, and manual skills. This leads to job creation and housing for local residents, which creates huge socio-economic benefits. Parts of a farm that were never productive before and did not make a contribution, such as mountains and rivers, can now play a role. The construction of additional facilities increases the value of the farm. It offers great marketing value for the farmer's products. Disadvantages. Agritourism brings with it extra responsibilities. Availability of trained people can be a problem. One of the most important aspects of agritourism is that the person who acts as a guide on a farm, in a national park or wherever, must be well informed about what is going on the farm and in the area and about farming or wildlife. In general, agriculture on the one hand and tourism on the other are regulated by many laws. In addition, aspects such as transportation, social welfare, nature conservation, empowerment, and other factors can create a problem. Getting started is an expensive process and liaison with all other stakeholders is important. Many farmers also underestimate the impact of loss of privacy. It leads to negative environmental impact if not planned properly. Erosion should be avoided, for example. Public liability in case of injuries is something that must be carefully considered when a farmer decides to enter agritourism. Niche markets. Definition of a niche market. A niche market or niche marketing means the focus of a product on a specific customer group for marketing. That portion of the market is usually very small. The product is aimed at satisfying specific needs within the market, as well as the price range, quality of production, and the demographics for which it is intended. Examples of niche markets are Karoo lamb, Wagyu meat, dairy products, products for health stores, etc. Niche markets, technology, the future of farming. Contrary to popular belief, mega farming is not the future of agriculture. There is room for smaller farms that specialize in niche markets or make optimal use of technology to make the most profit on a small area. There has been a debate for some time about the actual number of farmers in South Africa. There are several indications that there are more commercial farmers than previously assumed. Research by the University of Pretoria, UP's Department of Agricultural Economics recently released found that there are about 70,000 commercial farmers, as well as about 280,000 small farmers and about 700,000 subsistence farmers, according to the 2011 population census. The question is there still room for the smaller farmers, especially against the backdrop of the last few decades' shift to economies of scale? This required farming units to become larger, especially in terms of the production of agricultural commodities. More specifically, will there still be room for smaller family farms and part-time farmers in the future? Many farms will in future have to make a choice about where they want to position themselves in the market and what products they will produce. If you want to produce a commodity where there has been fairly standardization, such as maize, wheat, soybeans, beef or potatoes, you should strive for economies of scale to keep your expenses as low as possible. In this case, competition takes place on the basis of price, and the farm that can produce the product cheapest will always have a market. In contrast, markets are increasingly moving towards greater choices and products that stand out on the basis of quality, as consumer preferences have changed. It highlights the aspect of quality and brands to differentiate your product and make it possible to produce for different markets. It also raises the issue of traceability, which is already applicable on a fairly large scale in the export fruit industries. Industries must meet certain traceability requirements. This concept is currently gaining a foothold in the meat industry, and I expect it to spread further. This, of course, has implications for supermarkets. They prefer to put a standardized product on their shelves, but traceability to support the properties of the product is becoming increasingly important. They will use it to place a greater variety on their shelves going forward. Shops are also starting to get smaller to make a living in every neighborhood. The other aspect that joins this is that technology will turn agricultural production on its head in the next decade. The idea that you need large areas to produce a product profitably and compete in the market is going to change drastically in many industries. Technology will result in a greater variety of products being produced in a smaller area and for a niche market. So, it would seem that the idea that you only have a future in agriculture if you are striving for a large farm and economies of scale is changing. There are also worldwide analyses that show that large farms may be less efficient than smaller farms, and that smaller farms can achieve a very good return on their capital investment, even better than larger farms. Niche markets. The reason to pursue a niche market strategy instead of a commodity market strategy is mostly to get away from competition, especially from large competitors competing at a low cost. Instead of spending money and energy trying to compete at a lower price level by buying more land and machinery, for example, the emphasis is on a niche market and on meeting the needs of specific customers. Often this decision is made after an opportunity has been spotted, but other times it is simply a decision for the sake of economic survival. If a farmer is caught in the middle and does not see the chance to make large, new debts to expand, he then decides to rather drop a level and deliver a unique product for a specific target market. This means that you need to develop your own quality brand that represents your products' characteristics and to differentiate your product from the commodity market. It is often difficult to identify such a niche market and potential customers. In many cases, a niche market involves a more emotional connection with the customer and his needs, such as organic products and free-range chickens, which carry its own risks. Niche markets are currently being developed that are linked to a region and where the regional product has its own unique characteristics, such as Karoo lamb. Rooibos tea is also an example. Regional names are given international recognition and legal protection. The mistake that farmers often make is to expect a niche market to give you a price premium. This is only possible after a long time if your product features are scarce on the market and your quality mark is established. The goal should first be to make sure you have a market for your product with a more stable price. One of the characteristics of a niche market is precisely that prices tend to be less cyclical and your price risk is therefore lower. Also, remember, delivering for a niche market requires more farming systems and alternatives, production systems. Farming systems, production systems. The choice of a farming system is extremely important because the system will affect the profitability and stability of the farm. Once you have evaluated the land, buildings, labor, machinery, and available market, the farming system that will make the best use of these resources can be determined. There are a number of farming systems available for the different farms that exist in South Africa. What is a farming system? A farming system is defined as a grouping of individual farm systems that generally have similar resource bases, consists of similar business patterns, experiencing similar domestic livelihoods and limitations, could utilize similar development strategies and interventions. The classification of farming systems is based on the following criteria. Available natural resources, including water, soil, vegetation, climate, altitude, landscape, slope, farm size, tenure, organization, Dominant pattern of farm activities and domestic livelihoods, including arable farming, livestock, trees, aquaculture, hunt and collect, processing and activities away from the farm. Types of farming systems. Farming systems in Southern Africa include the following. Commercial farming. In a commercial farm, the sole purpose of the producer is to produce some or all of the products, sell and make a profit, hence the name, commercial farming. Profits are usually obtained through specialization, introduction of capital-intensive farming techniques, labor-saving technologies and maximizing crop yields per hectare through technical, synthetic fertilizers and pesticides, and natural resources. Commercial farming can take place on a large scale, mega farmers, or small scale. Governments worldwide are increasingly recognizing the important role that smaller farmers play in modern economies. It is important to remember that the term smallholder does not necessarily refer to the size of the land. It can also refer to the type of product the farmer produces, the market for which it is produced, or the farmer's reasons for farming, lifestyle. Commercial farms, megafarmers, are in some respects similar to large industrial enterprises. The harvested primary product can, for example, be processed on site and then sold as a complete product to a wholesaler, or it can be sold elsewhere for further processing. Commercial arable/horticultural/plantation producer. For the commercial producer, the purpose is the large-scale production of crops and their sale, as well as distribution of the product to wholesalers or retailers. Crops such as wheat, maize, tea, coffee, sugarcane, nuts, citrus, cotton, and various kinds of vegetables and fruits are harvested and sold on local and world markets. Commercial livestock producer. Commercial livestock farming includes all forms of livestock production and livestock farming. This farming method includes stud farming, where the farmer raises livestock, large or small, stock, genetically through selection and breeding. Commercial livestock farmers obtain their male breeding material from stud farmers to improve their production of meat and/or fiber. Irrigation farming. Several areas in South Africa are extremely suitable for planting annual and perennial crops. Under irrigation. Irrigation schemes in South Africa include Hartswater/Volhardts and Lower Orange River. The irrigated areas contribute greatly to food supply in times of drought when crops can be produced under irrigation. Mixed farming, grain and livestock. This production system is one of the most important production systems in South Africa. Where above average rainfall occurs, more than one crop is grown on a farm. In the drier areas, only one crop is grown per year. The crops that are mainly grown are maize and wheat. Along with the crop component, a livestock component is also kept. This utilizes the reserves. Subsistence farming. Subsistence farming means that producers and their families consume most or all of their production for their own needs. These producers can exchange or sell some of their products, but use most themselves. Subsistence farmers' risk is usually high because they farm on smaller pieces of land. Cattle are kept for cultivating land, as traction for plowing lands, breeding, fertilizing, milking, lobola, bridle price, as well as emergency sales. The number of cattle also usually indicates the wealth of the owner. This farming system is largely affected by droughts and uncertainty in the markets. How is a production/farming method chosen? The choice of a production method depends on the following. Profitability. The potential profitability of the different systems should be considered during an examination of future market trends. Efficiency. The profitability of production is determined by the efficiency of production systems, with each production system having to be evaluated separately. For example, in beef cattle production, a low weaning percentage of a weaner calf production system will have a greater impact on profitability than when following a marketing system over 18 months. The efficiency of production systems will also depend on the quality/intensity of management. Markets. The distance to and from markets must be taken into account as transportation costs affect profitability. Thus, selling weaner calves from the farm may be more profitable than sending slaughter animals to the abattoir. Natural resources and climate. The interaction of natural resources, climate, and population determines the physical basis of farming systems. The resources and climate determine the availability of land and carrying capacity for grazing, and also where which crops can be grown/planted. Where planted pastures or crops can be grown economically, an intensive system can be managed profitably. The presence and/or absence of certain climatic conditions therefore determines the type of production system to be followed. Natural resource access and control policies. Legislation may place restrictions on the use of natural resources to protect them against increasing levels of degradation or availability to all, e.g. mineral extraction laws. Human capital and training. A shortage of skilled labor is limiting for development. If skilled laborers are not available, advanced production systems cannot be considered. The availability of laborers also determines the type of production system that will be followed. Socioeconomic considerations. This plays a major role in the production system chosen as input costs have risen drastically over the past few years. This has resulted in less fertilizer, chemicals, and seeds being used to produce products, which in turn leads to a reduced income. Different farming methods. Extensive, livestock and arable farming. Large areas in South Africa fall into this category as it is determined by environmental factors, such as field type and carrying capacity. This system requires small inputs of labor, fertilizer and capital relative to the territory on which farming takes place. Extensive farming mostly refers to sheep and cattle farming with large camps where livestock can graze/walk freely in areas with low agricultural productivity, but can also refer to the large-scale cultivation of, for example, wheat, barley and other grain crops. Nomadic herding of livestock is an extreme example of extensive farming, where shepherds constantly move their animals to pastures supplemented by seasonal rains. Semi-intensive. Semi-intensive systems are usually followed where the amount of soil is a limiting factor. It is a mixture of intensive and extensive farming. Animals can sometimes be kept indoors, but are also allowed outside to search for food. Sheep prefer shorter grass and can therefore be successfully kept with cattle in a semi-intensive system where pastures are planted for lambs in the winter. Intensive, livestock and arable farming. There is usually a higher capital outlay per hectare of land and more labor, permanent buildings, and/or structures for housing workers, as well as for the animals or plants that need to be protected. Intensive farming is in many cases the final phase of the given farming system. Intensive farming practices include high-yield crop cultivation using correct fertilizer application and quantity according to soil type, pest control application and keeping animals indoors or under concentrated conditions such as in feedlots and modern dairies. Although food production is increased per unit/hectare, in the case of crops it has a less detrimental effect on the environment, but in the livestock branch a greater detrimental effect, due to accumulation of waste products such as manure and polluted water. Precision farming. Advantages of mechanization. Work is made easier. Work done faster. Machinery can work in high temperatures. It is cheaper because fewer workers have to be hired. Exhaustion does not occur. Machinery can be rented by neighbors and thus generate money. Definition: precision farming. Precision farming is an integrated production management system that uses various technologies to produce a product in a country where the various shortcomings are managed at different levels and inputs are given to increase the yield capacity of the specific country. Precision farming can be summed up as doing the right thing, in the right place, in the right way at the right time. Practical application. Agronomic approach: change in cultivation practices by taking into account the real needs of the crop, improve fertilization program. Technical approach: better time management at farm level, planning of agricultural activities. Environmental approach: reducing the impact of agriculture on the environment, improved estimation of nitrogen needs and reduced water runoff. Economic approach: increase in output and/or decrease in input, increase in efficiency, lower cost in nitrogen fertilization through effective application. Successful application of precision farming requires 3 steps. Farmers need to get accurate maps of the spatial variables of those factors that determine crop yield, e.g. soil, plants, and pests. These variables must be controlled by site-specific management recommendations, as well as accurate input control technology. An evaluation of the economic environments and social impact on the farm and adjacent ecosystems. Precision farming utilizes 6 state-of-the-art technologies. Global Positioning Systems, GPS, which provide a navigation system to determine the location of each tractor or threshing machine anywhere on a land within less than 2 meters on a longitude with consultation grid. Geographic Information Systems, GIS. GIS computers capture and manage spatial data related to crop productivity and soil inputs. Variable Rate Technology, VRT, which enables the control of field outputs from the aircraft or helicopter. Optical Satellite Image provides real-time monitoring of crop development and disorders due to changes in soil potential, physical or climate variables, pests and diseases or nutritional deficiencies. Satellite Image and Aerial Images. Near-infrared, NIR, orthorectified images. This technology is becoming increasingly important, initially in the case of timber and wine farmers, but now it is expanding to all farmers. Precision farming cannot operate without the technology of GPS, Global Positioning System, and GIS, Geographic Information System. GPS is a network of satellites primarily designed and managed by the United States Army. The 24 satellites are placed in orbit around the Earth and send precise satellite time and position to soil receivers. The soil receiver can receive messages from several satellites and then convert them to the exact position of the soil receiver by means of a triangle measurement. YES consists of a computer software database used to store inputs, analyze, obtain information and display spatially referenced geographic information in map form. Yield recording devices and crop yield measuring instruments are installed on harvester equipment. The output data and position, via GPS, of the stopper from off the monitor are recorded and stored at regular intervals. The GIS software converts the information to yield charts, monitors and flow meters. Variable Application Rate Technology, VRT, consists of implements such as planters, fertilizer applicators etc. on the farm that can exercise precise control over crop inputs and tillage operations. Data processing, data collection, data evaluation, technique application, machine application, data processing, harvest, etc. The use of GPS in farm vehicles, with the incorporation of further sensors, makes the following possible. The recording of distance traveled, automatic control of vehicles, determination of crop yield, determination of soil properties, plant properties, etc. Place for specific type of tillage. Advantages. The cost of producing the product in the area can be reduced. The risk of environmental pollution through indiscriminate application of agrochemicals is reduced, and more accurate crop yield estimates. Collected information may result in plant density, fertilizer inputs, and other inputs being determined more accurately. The potential productivity of the soil is determined. This knowledge is available for every subblock, grid cell in the country. From the information, the optimal seed density of the crop can be determined. The information is also used to determine the amount and type of fertilizer per subblock. The crop yield can be predicted using the information. Production information is translated into appropriate management strategies. Specific tillage methods can be applied per subblock. Disadvantages of precision farming. The biggest disadvantage associated with precision farming is the cost involved. It is only cost-effective in large commercial crop production enterprises. Certain technological skills by operator. This is practically not feasible if diversified crop production is applied to one country, e.g., different vegetable crops are grown on one country. Because the nutrient requirements of the crops differ, this will make precision farming practically impossible. Precision farming, by its very nature, promotes a monoculture of crop cultivation. Examples of planters. Planting crops is a critical operation and special attention must be paid to the correct setting of the planter. Points that deserve attention. Set it to desired row width. Set it for the correct spacing in rows. Calibrate to feed the correct amount of fertilizer. Set for correct planting depth according to soil type and moisture content of soil. Practical application of GPS. Global Positioning System, GPS, allows farmers to easily view/explore their fields. Provide a series of GIS cards. Practical application of GIS. Geographic Information System, GIS, consists of a computer-based data software system used to import received data, obtain data from equipment and satellites, analyze data received from different sources, and display relevant data in a map-like form, spatially referenced geographic information. Practical application of VRT. Variable Application Technology, VRT, consists of farm field equipment with the ability to precisely control the application rate of crop inputs and machining activities. Soil sampling according to grids, management zones and soil maps. One approach to precision farming is to divide a land into cells on a grid, with each cell usually 1 or 2 acres in size. For example, a land of 80 hectares is divided into 80 geographically referenced points where each cell is 1 hectare. It therefore gives 80 points where soil samples are drawn, soil profile descriptions are done and site characteristics are recorded. A problem with this sort of sampling is the variation in soil types in each grid. This variation makes it much more difficult to determine soil properties within the grid for managing crop inputs. An alternative to sampling in grids is zone sampling. The soil samples taken in grids' uniform properties are combined to form zones. The soils are now placed in homogeneous management zones of uniformly spaced grids. (2.4.2) Drainage maps. Radiation differences in soils due to soil type and soil moisture content are used to indicate moisture presence in soils by means of infrared, IR, color photographs. Accurate drainage maps are required for maintenance or for the installation of new or additional line systems. The information can then be used to install drainage systems or to install existing systems maintained. Monitoring crop quality/health. Remote sensing technology that utilizes radiation data is increasingly being used to determine water stress in plants and gives farmers the ability to monitor crop health. Remote sensing images are combined with a model that indicates water stress in crop plants. CWSI model equals crop water stress model, to measure variation in a country. Image data of the soil and crops are processed and then added to the GIS database for use. Precision livestock farming. At the end of the last century, livestock farming operated with average values per group, mainly due to the size of operations. However, with the help of technology such as software and electronic identification, EID, precision livestock farming, PLF, is now returning to recognizing the individual animal. Precision livestock farming is a subdivision of precision farming. Identification and related sensory and detection technologies to improve nutrition and control are used in precision livestock farming. The health, behavior and well-being of animals are becoming increasingly important for the quality of food. If the health, behavior and well-being of animals are monitored, consumers have the peace of mind that the products they buy come from healthy animals that are kept according to good farming practices. Advantages, disadvantages. Animal and hand. Lower cost. Less impact on the environment. Contribute to organic waste. Self-propagating. Relatively slow. Requires daily care and supervision even when in disuse. Mechanized. Strong. Speed. Expensive. Requires special skills and training. Harmful to soil, compaction. Difficult to get rid of when no longer in use. Mechanization rules and regulations. The Occupational Health and Safety Act, Act No. 181 of 1993, provides for the health and safety of persons in their work and for the health and safety of persons in connection with the use of machinery. Regulations of occupational health and safety legislation. The following duties of employers regarding the health and safety of their employees are outlined by law. The provision and maintenance of work systems, plant and machinery, which are as far as reasonably practicable, safe and without risk to health. Must take reasonable steps to prevent or eliminate any obstacle or potential obstacle to the safety or health of employees, before relying on protective equipment of the person. Must reasonably ensure the absence of risk to health in connection with the production, processing, use, handling, storage or transport of articles or ingredients. Must ensure the establishment of preventive measures against hazards as far as practicable that threaten the health and safety of persons involved in any work. As far as possible, no employee should be allowed to do any work or process, handle, store or transport any article or ingredient or to operate any plant or machinery without the precautionary measures in place. Work with machinery should be done under the general supervision of someone trained. Is to understand the dangers associated with it and what the authority is to ensure that preventive measures are implemented. Implements and the production process. Whether or not to cultivate fields, there is a large variety of machining equipment. Each type of soil cultivator has a specialized task to perform. Tillage implements include all the equipment used to prepare soil for planting crops, such as plows, e.g. plowshares, disc plows; tillers, e.g. chopsticks, tooth eggs, dish eggs; horse plows, e.g. disc harrow plows; ripping plow; harvesting machines; spray equipment. There are old and new paradigms about whether to plow or not. Old paradigm, tillage is essential for yield. Berry plant remains with tillage implements. Leave soil uncovered for weeks and months. Soil temperature extremes occur due to direct radiation. Combustion of crop residues is allowed. Strong emphasis on chemical processes in soil. First option, chemical pest control. Soil erosion is caused by extremely high rainfall. Consequences of tillage and uncovered soil. Wind and water erosion are inevitable. Reduced water infiltration into the soil. Soil water less available. Organic matter in the soil and soil quality inevitably decrease. Soil carbon is lost as carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, which contributes to global warming. Soil degradation, chemical, physical and biological, occurs. Crop productivity decreases. Fertilizer use and production costs high. Family farm survival is threatened, lower yields and profitable production, insufficient income. Rural poverty, urbanization increase pressure on urban infrastructure and employment. Urban poverty, slums, crime, social conflict, political instability. New paradigm, tillage is not essential for yield. Crop residues remain on the soil surface as mulch. Soil is never uncovered, there is a permanent soil cover. Coating serves as a buffer for soil temperatures. Burning of mulch prohibited. Emphasis on biological processes in soil. First option, biological pest control. Soil erosion is caused by soil mismanagement. Consequences of no tillage and permanent soil cover. Almost no wind and water erosion. Increased water infiltration into the soil. Soil water more readily available. Organic material content of soil and soil quality are maintained or improved. Carbon is isolated in the soil, which increases soil quality and reduces global warming. Soil improvement, chemical, physical and biological. Crop productivity increases. Fertilizer use and production costs reduced. Survival of the family farm ensures even more sustainable and profitable crop production. Basic needs satisfied, rural standard of living and quality of life increased and diversified productivity increased profit. Primary cultivation implements. Moldboard plows. This implement is used to turn sods up to 300 mm deep and is especially suitable for heavier soils with a lot of structure. A further advantage of the turning of the soil is that wheat seed and unwanted crop residue can be deeply buried. Disc plows and discs. The disc plow has a cutting action and its main advantage is that it penetrates better under hard, dry conditions with the added benefit that its wear and tear is less than with a moldboard plow. This implement is more efficient in fields with lots of plant residue and less clogging occurs. The main disadvantage of the implement is that it breaks down soil structure very fast, and this worsens when plowing at a high speed. This implement is suitable for heavier and harder soils, where structural loss is not so critical, but is not recommended on sandy soils. Chisel plows. Chisel plows are mainly used to turn soil to a depth of 250 mm. The best results are obtained if the soil is relatively dry, because the chisels break the soil and create structural units. Under very wet conditions, and especially in clay soil, furrows are made that have an undesirable spreading action. This plow is therefore more suitable for sandy soils where a loose structured topsoil is desired to improve infiltration and reduce erosion. Under dry conditions, big sods are broken loose, which inhibit plant development. Rippers. Rippers are used where deep cultivation is needed and the turning of the soil layers is undesirable. When fields are cultivated to the same depth for several years, a plow sole develops. This limiting layer inhibits effective water infiltration and root development. To establish better drainage, conservation and utilization, it is important that the layer is regularly broken up. Secondary soil cultivation tools. Rotivators. Under the right conditions, this is a beneficial implement that can prepare a seedbed in one step, especially in damp clay soils. On dry, sandy soils it destroys the structure in a very short time span. In many cases, rotating rotivators are used for weed control, but is only effective on weeds with shallow root systems. Control is only applied for short periods where weeds with relatively deep root systems grow, after which shoots begin to grow again. Rotivators leaves a fine, bare surface behind that is easily eroded by wind. Tine harrows consist of a variety of hoeing implements that are mainly used for the control of young weeds, but they are also used as surface crust crushers. Cultivation depth is rarely more than 100 mm. The implements are only effective on moist soil. On dry, clay soil it is completely ineffective because the teeth cannot penetrate the soil. They are often used for seedbed preparation. Harrows. Harrows also consist of a variety of implements. The toothed harrow is mainly used to level a seedbed and is only effective if the seedbed is already finely pounded. Planters. Planter is implements used to make the input, seed, fertilizer in the soil so that there is a product, crop, can be produced. This includes conventional planters and no-till planters in harvesters/harvesters. These are implements that collect the produce crop and the plant material of the grain, maize, wheat, etc. The collected grain is then held for sale or storage. Animal traction. Animal traction implies the use of animals' power to perform a certain job. There are some commercial farmers in South Africa who use animal traction to get them supplement tractor operations and reduce operating costs. Typical activities include transporting farm inputs, products and feed, distributing fertilizer and manure, and the hoeing of weeds. Setting up plows and tillers. All types of plows, including rake plate plows and disc plows, require different modes of adjustment. The disc plow requires much more skill to set than the grid plate plow. All plows must be set B to do the following. To leave an even soil surface. Easy to pull to save fuel. Allow the tractor to run straight into the plow front. To plow at the required depth. Both hard and soft soil surfaces penetrate. Plow the total area and do not leave pieces unprocessed. Properties of an implement for a specific task. Agricultural equipment is very expensive and is an important investment for the farmer. You need the right and informed make choice. The wrong choice can lead to huge financial losses. Tips to buy right. Choose customizable implements. It should be able to fit your existing equipment. It must be within your existing conditions can work. Implement must be the right size and capacity for your conditions. Beware of over or undercapitalize, it costs money. Possible expansion must be kept in mind. Choice regarding the technological advancement must be made. Is training necessary and what will the cost be? Calculate the running cost of the implement to determine if it is economically justified and if it might be better to buy or rent smaller. Research the product regarding its efficacy, reliability and availability of parts and services. Make a choice between automated or manual models. Decide what type of accessories or extras are needed. Decision-making steps to obtain a specific implement. Can current implements be customized to meet your needs? What are the pros and cons of buying, renting or lending implements? Are local services an option? Are you mechanically trained or willing to undergo training to repair plain implements? What type of equipment or implements do you need for your purpose? Disadvantages of using implements. Implements are expensive. Using implements requires a more skilled laborer. Implements can destroy certain properties of soils. If it is no longer needed, there is no market for it. The value of implements decreases. The implement may be damaged. This could lead to unemployment. The cost of fuel and services is high. It needs trained workers, which leads to an increase in wages. Advantages of using implements and equipment. Soil can be cultivated quickly and it saves time. The crop can be harvested from lands faster. Less labor per hectare is required to do work. Machining is done more evenly. More advanced farming practices can be followed thanks to the use of equipment.